Welcome back, everyone. Before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I'm a sales consultant, 34 years old, and I've probably stayed in over 200 hotels in the last decade. You get used to the rhythm. Check in, find the ice machine, set 3 alarms, survive the conference, check out. It becomes mechanical. Columbus was supposed to be another forgettable stop. The company booked me at a comfort lodge off I-70. 3 stars, maybe 2.5 if you're being honest. But it was clean enough, close to the convention center, and had free parking. I didn't need luxury, I just needed 8 hours of sleep before a 7 a.m. presentation. I checked in around 9 p.m. The lobby smelled like industrial cleaner and burnt coffee. The girl at the front desk, her name tag said Cora, barely looked up from her phone when she slid the key card across the counter. Room 414, 4th floor, end of the hall, elevators to your left. The elevator was slow, groaning between floors like it was debating whether to keep going. The 4th floor hallway stretched out ahead of me, longer than it should have been, with that generic hotel carpet designed to hide decades of stains. Something about the walk to my room felt heavy. Not creepy exactly, just still. No TVs humming through the walls, no footsteps, no ice machine rattling. I remember thinking, finally a quiet floor. I should have known better. The room was standard, queen bed with a floral comforter that probably hadn't been updated since 2005, a desk with a lamp that flickered once when I turned it on, blackout curtains that didn't quite meet in the middle. The air conditioner wheezed to life when I adjusted the thermostat. I dropped my suitcase, plugged in my phone, and took a shower hot enough to loosen the knots in my shoulders. Afterward, I stood at the window looking out at the parking lot below. A handful of cars scattered across the spaces, a semi-truck idling near the back. Nothing unusual. The room next to mine, 414A, had a Do Not Disturb sign on the handle. I'd noticed it walking past. Didn't think anything of it. I set my alarm for 5:45 a.m., double-checked the deadbolt and chain, and got into bed around 10:30. The silence felt thick, not peaceful, dense, like the air itself was holding its breath. I closed my eyes and told myself it was just road fatigue. I was wrong. I don't know what woke me first, the sound or the feeling. My eyes opened to complete darkness. The red glow of the alarm clock read 2:13 a.m. And then I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Maybe 3 seconds. Knock, knock, knock. It was coming from the wall beside my bed, the wall I shared with room 414A. I lay there frozen, heart pounding, trying to rationalize it. Drunk guest, plumbing issue, anything. But the knocking didn't stop. Same rhythm, same intensity. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, mechanical and precise. I sat up and pressed my ear against the wall. The knocking was soft but insistent, like someone tapping with their knuckles rather than pounding. "Hello?" I said. The knocking stopped. For about 10 seconds, nothing, just that thick silence pressing against my ears. Then it started again, faster this time, more urgent. I grabbed the hotel phone and dialed 0. "Front desk, this is Cora." "Hey, this is room 414. There's someone knocking from the room next to me, 414A. It's been going on for a while." Silence. Typing sounds. "Sir, room 414A is vacant. That room has been out of service for 6 months. Plumbing issues. No one is in there." The knocking continued through the wall. "I'm hearing it right now," I said. "It's probably the pipes. These old buildings make noises. I can send maintenance in the morning." "Can someone just check the room, please?" She sighed. "I'll make a note for the morning shift." She hung up before I could respond. The knocking didn't stop until 4 a.m. I didn't sleep the rest of the night.
Every time I started to drift off, the rhythm would start again. It felt less like random noise and more like a pattern, a message I couldn't understand. By 6 a.m., I gave up. Showered, dressed, and headed to my conference like a zombie running on caffeine. The presentation went fine, autopilot kicked in, but my mind kept circling back to that wall, that rhythm. Something about it nagged at me like a word on the tip of my tongue. During lunch, I found a quiet corner and pulled out my phone. My fingers moved almost on their own. Knocking patterns Morse code. The results loaded. 3 short signals, pause. 3 short signals, pause. 3 short signals. SOS. The International Distress Signal. My blood ran cold. Someone wasn't just making noise. Someone was calling for help. I left the conference early. I know that sounds insane, walking out of a work event because of a hunch, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. When I got back to the hotel around 4 p.m., I went straight to room 414A. The Do Not Disturb sign was still there. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing at first. Then, faintly, tap, 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 tap. Weak, barely audible, but definitely there. I went straight to the front desk. Different clerk now, older guy named Ben with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his collar. I need someone to check room 414A. I know your system says it's empty, but I'm hearing sounds from inside, tapping, like someone's in distress. Ben squinted at me. Sir, that room is out of service. No one's had a key to it in months. Then how do you explain the knocking? He shrugged. Old building, pipes, happens all the time. It's not pipes, it's a pattern. SOS. Someone is signaling for help. He looked at me like I'd suggested the room was haunted. Open the room, I said, louder than I intended, or I'm calling the police. That got his attention. Ben finally agreed to come up with me, more to shut me up than anything else. We took the elevator in tense silence. When we reached 414A, he knocked first. Hello? Maintenance check. No response. He slid the keycard into the lock. Red light. Then how is there a Do Not Disturb sign? He paused, looked at the sign like he was seeing it for the first time. That shouldn't be there. He pulled out a physical master key and fitted it into the manual lock. The door clicked open. The smell hit us first. Stale air, sweat, something metallic underneath. The room was dark, blackout curtains pulled tight. Ben reached for the light switch. And there she was. A woman, mid-20s, bound to a chair in the corner, duct tape over her mouth, zip ties on her wrists and ankles, the skin underneath raw and bleeding. Her fingers moved against the armrest, tap, 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 tap. Even now, she was still signaling. Ben stumbled backward, fumbling for his radio, and that's when I heard it. A creak behind us. The bathroom door swung open. A man stepped out, mid-30s, shaved head, completely calm expression that didn't match what we'd just found. In his hand, a syringe. You shouldn't be in here, he said quietly. This room is out of service. Ben was frozen in the doorway. I grabbed the desk lamp and ripped the cord from the wall. Don't move, I said. The man tilted his head. I don't know how you heard her. The woman made a muffled sob behind the tape. Something in me snapped. I swung the lamp hard, caught him on the shoulder. He stumbled, the syringe dropped. Ben finally unfroze, tackling him from behind.
We held him down for 7 minutes until the police arrived. 7 minutes that felt like 7 hours. Her name was Vicki Burks, 24 years old, nursing student from Dayton, missing for 5 days. The man had grabbed her from a gas station parking lot 60 miles away. He'd been keeping her in that out-of-service room. Police later discovered he had an arrangement with someone on the night staff, though they never confirmed exactly who or how deep it went. Someone had been looking the other way. They found a second victim's belongings in his car, a woman named Sarah Hendricks, still listed as missing. They never found her. Vicki had been tapping on that wall for 3 days, hoping someone would hear, hoping someone would care enough to investigate. I testified at the trial 6 months later, looked him in the eyes across the courtroom. He showed no emotion, not guilt, not anger, just that same calm expression. He got 45 years. But here's what keeps me up at night. That room was empty for 6 months. How many guests heard knocking and did nothing? How many decided it wasn't their problem? I called the hotel weeks later, asked how many guests had been in room 414 during those 5 days. They wouldn't tell me. But I know I wasn't the first person to hear her. I was just the first one who didn't stop asking questions. If you ever hear knocking from a room that's supposed to be empty, 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, don't ignore it. Don't assume it's pipes. Don't let someone convince you you're imagining things. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is mind your own business. But Vicky's story isn't the only nightmare that's happened behind closed hotel doors. The next story comes from someone who thought she was completely alone in her private luxury suite, a woman who was about to discover that privacy is just an illusion. What she found had been watching her for 3 nights, and she had no idea it was there. Story 2. I'm 42 years old, and until last spring, I hadn't spent a single night alone in 18 years. My marriage ended in February. Not dramatically. No screaming matches, no plates thrown against walls. Just a slow, quiet death that neither of us acknowledged until the paperwork was already filed and the moving boxes were stacked in the hallway. After 2 decades of sharing everything, a bed, a bathroom, a life, I suddenly had an empty apartment that echoed every time I walked through it. My therapist suggested I do something for myself, something indulgent, something that was entirely mine. So I booked 2 nights at the Belmont Hotel downtown, a boutique place with a spa, room service, and suites with soaking tubs and king beds you could get lost in. $400 a night, more than I usually spent on anything for myself. But that was the point. I was going to drink wine in a plush bathrobe, order expensive room service at midnight, sleep in the middle of the bed because there was no one to negotiate with anymore. I was going to remember what it felt like to be alone without being lonely. That's not how it turned out. I checked in on a Friday afternoon. The lobby was beautiful. Marble floors, fresh flowers, a fireplace that made the whole space smell like cedar. The kind of place that makes you feel like you've stepped into someone else's life. My suite was on the 8th floor, room 812, corner unit with a view of the city skyline and a bathroom bigger than my childhood bedroom. I stood in the doorway for a full minute just taking it in. The bed had about 15 pillows arranged in an architectural formation. The closet had plush robes hanging inside. The minibar was stocked with small batch gin and dark chocolate. For the first time in months, I felt myself exhale. I unpacked slowly, arranged my toiletries on the bathroom counter in the order I always use them: face wash, toner, moisturizer, makeup bag, hairbrush. It's a holdover from my anxious 20s, a small way of controlling something in a chaotic world. I ordered a cheese board and a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc, took a bath that lasted an hour and a half, fell asleep watching something mindless on the oversized TV. The first night was perfect. It was the second morning when things started to feel wrong. I'm particular about my routines, always have been. My ex used to tease me about it, the way I notice when something's been moved even a fraction of an inch. When I walked into the bathroom Saturday morning, my hairbrush was on the wrong side. I know how that sounds, crazy, paranoid, but I knew I hadn't moved it. I could picture exactly where I'd placed it, to the right of my makeup bag, bristles facing down. Now it was on the left side, bristles up. Someone moved my hairbrush. I called the front desk to confirm housekeeping had come by. "Let me check, ma'am." A pause. "No, your do not disturb sign was on, so they skipped your room." I looked at the door. The sign was still hanging on the inside handle. I hung up and told myself I was being ridiculous, but I didn't leave the room for the rest of the morning. By Saturday evening, I'd almost convinced myself I was imagining things, stress from the divorce, anxiety patterns emerging after being alone for decades. I ordered dinner in, took another bath, drank most of a bottle of wine. When I got into bed around 11 p.m., I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The pillow on the right side of the bed, the side I hadn't slept on, hadn't touched, had an indent, a clear head-shaped depression in the center. I'd been sleeping on the left side, same as always, but someone had rested their head there. My skin went cold. I checked the closet, under the bed, the bathroom, the balcony. Nothing. I was alone. But I didn't feel alone.
I barely slept. Every sound felt amplified. The AC clicking on, the elevator dinging, my own heartbeat pounding. Around 3 a.m., I heard something from the bathroom. Soft, like fabric rustling. The bathroom door was closed. I remembered closing it. But now there was a strip of light underneath. The bathroom light was on. I hadn't turned it on. I lay frozen, staring at that strip of yellow light. It clicked off. I waited for the door to open, for footsteps, for whatever was in there to come for me. Nothing happened, but I didn't sleep again. In the morning, I found cigarette ash in the sink. I don't smoke, have never smoked in my life. I went straight to the front desk, still in my robe. Someone has been in my room. I don't know how, but someone is getting in. The manager, a polished woman whose nameplate read C. Brown, smiled patiently. "Ma'am, our keycard system is state-of-the-art. No one can access your room without a registered key." "Then explain the cigarette ash, the pillow indent, my things being moved." Her smile flickered. She took me to a back office and pulled up the hallway camera. We watched Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday night. No one entered or exited room 812 except me. "See?" she said. "No one's been in your room." "Then someone's getting in another way." She looked at me the way my ex used to look at me when I noticed things he didn't want me to notice. "Ma'am, the walls are solid concrete. The windows don't open. I think perhaps you're experiencing some stress." "I'm not imagining this." I went back to my room with an idea. I propped my phone on the dresser, angled toward the bathroom door, and hit record. Then I left for lunch. 3 hours later, I watched the footage. For the first 2 hours, nothing. Just an empty room. Then, at the 2:14 mark, the bathroom door slowly swung open, and a man lowered himself down from the ceiling. I couldn't breathe. He was wearing maintenance coveralls, average build, brown hair going gray, nothing remarkable. He moved through my room slowly, methodically. He picked up my hairbrush and held it to his face, inhaling deeply. He opened my closet and pressed his face into my cream silk blouse, stayed there for almost a minute, just breathing. He sat on my bed, the right side, laid his head on the pillow. He went through my suitcase, touched my underwear, put everything back exactly where it had been. 40 minutes. He spent 40 minutes in my room. Then he climbed back up into the ceiling and replaced the panel like nothing happened. The video showed me returning an hour later, walking into the bathroom where he'd just been, lying on the bed where he'd rested his head. I'd been sleeping 3 feet below him for 3 nights. I called 911 with shaking hands. The police found the access point, a maintenance hatch in the bathroom ceiling connected to a crawl space above the entire 8th floor. The hatch was supposed to be permanently sealed. Someone had replaced the screws with clips that opened from inside. They found him still up there, curled in the crawl space with a sleeping bag, a flashlight, a backpack of supplies. Police later told me he'd been living up there for weeks at a time, moving between rooms when guests checked out.
His name was Carl, former maintenance technician, fired 6 months earlier. He'd kept a uniform, kept his knowledge of the building's layout. In his backpack, they found a camera, dozens of recordings, women in bathrooms, women sleeping, women who believed they were alone. I was victim number 23. Carl pleaded guilty, got 18 months. 18 months for 23 women, about 3 weeks per victim. It's been 8 months. I still can't stay in hotels. I check ceilings now, every bathroom, every closet, every room I enter. I look for panels that don't quite fit, screws that seem loose. My therapist says I'm hypervigilant, that I need to work on trusting safe spaces again. But that room was supposed to be safe. I paid $400 a night for privacy. And the whole time, someone was watching from 3 feet above my head. I don't trust ceilings anymore. Don't trust keycard systems or security footage that shows empty hallways. Sometimes the monster doesn't come through the door. Sometimes he's already inside, just waiting for you to close your eyes. But at least I found proof. At least I knew what was real. The next story is about someone who wasn't so lucky. Someone who stayed in a room where the horror wasn't hiding in the ceiling. It was hiding in the walls, in a room that wasn't supposed to exist. And what he discovered there had been waiting for over 90 years. Story 3. I'm a photographer, 29 years old, freelance, specializing in architectural shots. Old buildings are my thing, the way light hits century-old brick, the stories written in crumbling plaster and original hardwood. I've traveled across the country shooting historic theaters, abandoned factories, Victorian mansions turned bed and breakfasts. I don't believe in ghosts, never have. I believe in angles, shadows, and the way imagination fills in gaps where light doesn't reach. The Whitmore Hotel in Savannah had been on my list for years. Built in 1892, it had survived 2 fires, a hurricane, and nearly a century of guests who claimed it was haunted. The architecture was stunning. Original ironwork, hand-carved moldings, windows with glass so old that it started to ripple. I booked room 713 specifically, corner unit, 7th floor, with original crown molding and a window facing the courtyard, perfect for morning light. I arrived on a Thursday evening in late October. The lobby looked exactly like the photos. Dark wood paneling, antique chandeliers, a marble front desk manned by a man in a 3-piece suit like it was still 1920. "Room 713?" I said, sliding my confirmation across the counter. The man, his nameplate read Gerald, looked down at the paper and hesitated. Just for a second, a flicker of something crossing his face. Then he smiled. "Excellent choice, Mr. Hartman. End of the hall, 7th floor. Very quiet up there." I didn't think about that pause until much later. The 7th floor corridor stretched out ahead of me when the elevator opened. Long, narrow, wallpaper in a deep burgundy that seemed to absorb the light from the antique sconces. And quiet. Not just silent, quiet in the way old buildings get. Like the walls had absorbed too many conversations and couldn't take any more. The 713 room was beautiful. 12-foot ceilings, crown molding with original gilded accents, a 4-poster bed that probably weighed more than my car. I spent the first hour shooting the room itself, the way late afternoon light came through the wavy antique glass, the shadows the bedposts threw across the floral wallpaper. Around 7 p.m., I stepped into the hallway for some wider shots of the corridor. That's when I saw her. A woman, maybe mid-30s, walking toward my end of the hall. But it wasn't her presence that made me freeze. It was what she was wearing. A dress that looked old, not vintage chic old, legitimately old. high-collared, long-hemmed, the kind of style you see in photographs from the 1920s, dark fabric with delicate lace at the throat and wrists. She stopped at the door just before mine. She produced a key, not a key card, a real brass key, and fitted it into a lock. The door opened. She stepped inside. The door closed behind her with a soft click. I stood there processing what I'd seen. A woman in period costume with an antique key. Probably a guest who took the hotel's theme seriously. But something bothered me. I walked to the end of the hall. 710, 711, 712, 713. 713 was my room, the corner unit, the last door. There was no door next to it. There was no room 714. The hallway ended at my door. Beyond it was just wall. I stood there, hand pressed against the wallpaper where I'd seen her enter. Maybe I'd miscounted. Maybe she'd gone into 712. I walked back down the hall, checking numbers again. 710, 711, 712, 713. 713 was the last room. There was no 714. But I'd watched her go through a door. I'd heard it close. I went back to the front desk. Gerald was still there. Quick question. How many rooms are on the 7th floor? He didn't look up. 7 rooms, sir. 707 through 713. No 714? His polishing stopped. Slowly, he raised his eyes to meet mine. No, sir. 713 is the corner. Always has been. I just saw a woman go into a room at the end of the hall, door right next to mine. Gerald looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Trick of the light, perhaps. These old buildings can be disorienting. I went back to my room, convinced I was losing my mind. I checked the wall where I'd seen the door. Solid, no seams, no outline, nothing. At 3:47 a.m., the knocking started. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, coming from the wall beside my bed, the wall where no room existed. I lay frozen, watching the clock tick to 3:48. The knocking stopped as suddenly as it started. In the morning, I researched.
The Whitmore had a dark history. In 1926, a fire broke out on the 7th floor. Official records said it started in room 714, a corner suite that had since been sealed off during renovation. A woman had died in that fire, Eleanor Vance, 34 years old, a guest from New York, staying alone. The fire started at 3:47 a.m. I found her photograph in the hotel's archived guest book online. She was wearing a high-collared dress with delicate lace, dark fabric, the exact dress I'd seen in the hallway. That night, I set up my camera on a tripod facing the wall, time-lapse mode, 1 frame every 10 seconds. At 3:47 a.m., the knocking came again, 3 slow beats. I held my breath and watched. On the wall beside my bed, a seam appeared. Not a crack, a seam, perfectly vertical, running floor to ceiling. And behind it, just for a moment, I swore I saw a door. Dark wood, brass handle. Then it was gone. By the 3rd night, I knew I should leave. Every rational part of my brain screamed that something was wrong, but I had to know. I found original blueprints in the historical archives. Room 714 had been real once, before the fire gutted it and the renovation sealed it away. The old access point was through a storage closet on the 6th floor. I waited until 2 a.m., found the unmarked door, picked the lock. Darkness that smelled like dust and something faintly chemical, old smoke that had never quite dissipated. Broken furniture, old linens, boxes of records. But in the corner, behind chairs that hadn't been moved in decades, I found something else. A door.
Solid wood, dark with age, a transom window above it, glass painted black from the inside. The frame was scorched, burn marks never painted over. I reached for the handle. It turned, the door swung open. Behind it, stairs leading up to a room that shouldn't exist. Room 714 was exactly as it must have looked in 1926. A brass bed frame, mattress long rotted away, a vanity with a cracked mirror, wallpaper blistered and peeled from heat that burned here a century ago. A dress draped over a chair, dark fabric with delicate lace, the same dress I'd seen in the hallway. And standing by the window, her back to me, was Eleanor. She didn't turn when I entered, didn't move at all. "I can see you," I said. "I know you're here." She turned, slowly, her face exactly as it appeared in that photograph, young, sad, alone. Her mouth moved, no sound came out, but I understood. "Help me." My hands moved on their own, camera up, flash ready. I pressed the shutter. The flash exploded through the room, the burned walls, the ruined furniture, the woman with her hand extended toward me. Then she was gone. The room was empty. The window was just a hole in the wall, bricked up decades ago. I ran. Down the stairs, through the storage room, up to the 7th floor, grabbed my bags, checked out at 4 a.m., leaving cash because I couldn't wait. Gerald watched me go with weary resignation, like he'd seen guests flee before, like he knew exactly why. I developed the photos a week later. Most showed exactly what I'd seen: an abandoned room, untouched for a century, charred walls, decay and dust. But one frame, the flash photo, showed something impossible. Eleanor, standing by the window, her face turned toward the camera, clear as any portrait. And behind her, in the window's reflection, flames. A fire that ended 98 years ago, still burning in the glass. I've never shown that photograph to anyone. I keep it in a drawer, face down. Sometimes I go weeks without thinking about it. But sometimes I wake at 3:47 a.m., heart pounding, certain I've heard knocking from a wall that shouldn't be there. The Whitmores, still in business, they've never acknowledged room 714. The only reference to the 1926 fire is a vague mention of historic renovations. They don't talk about Eleanor Vance, the corner suite that burned with a woman inside, the door that was walled over, the guest who never checked out. But if you ever book room 713, corner unit, end of the hall, 7th floor, look closely at the wall beside your bed. Look for a seam that shouldn't be there, the ghost of a door frame plastered over a century ago. And if you hear knocking at 3:47 a.m., 3 slow beats from the other side, don't investigate. Some doors are sealed for a reason. Some rooms stay occupied forever, even when they're supposed to be empty. I still have that photograph. I look at it sometimes, late at night. Eleanor's face, frozen in that moment before the flash died. "Help me," she said without speaking. But help her do what? Move on? Find peace? Or something I couldn't give her? I'll never know. But I don't photograph old hotels anymore. I don't stay in rooms at the end of hallways. I don't ignore strange sounds or convince myself what I'm seeing isn't real. Because sometimes it is real. Sometimes the dead don't rest. Sometimes they wait for someone to notice them, to hear them, to see them through a lens that captures what the naked eye refuses to accept. I haven't heard the knocking since Savannah. Not when I'm awake, but in my dreams every night I'm back in room 714, standing in the ashes, watching Eleanor turn. And in my dreams, she doesn't just mouth the words, she screams them. Thank you all so much for watching. These stories remind us that the most terrifying experiences happen in places where we're supposed to feel safe. Hotel rooms, private suites, quiet corners of buildings that have seen more than they'll ever tell. If you have your own hotel horror experience, drop it in the comments. We read every single one. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We've got more stories coming, stories that will make you think twice before you check into that roadside motel, before you ignore that strange sound in the wall. Because sometimes you're not imagining things. Stay safe out there. Trust your gut. See you in the next one.